hot in places where it's been cool. And we got to go where the enemy takes us.
Well, that, of course, is Senator Lindsey Graham after meeting with Defense Secretary James Mattis yesterday. The Pentagon saying it will soon brief Congress on the recent deaths of these 4 heroes, the U.S. Special Forces soldiers in Niger. They are the first American combat casualties in that Western African country. That ambush that took their lives, of course, raising many unanswered questions about what happened and the deployment. And Senator Graham says that as the influence of radical Islamic terrorism is spreading in Africa, we must do something about it. And the military, he says, is expanding the fight there.
First, halt. Ready, down. Ready, up. Ready, base. Ready, step.
There will be a funeral today for the 25-year-old Sergeant LaDavid Johnson.
Yeah, overnight in South Florida, hundreds of people, including friends, family, and just complete strangers, they all showed up for a public viewing. Sergeant Johnson, he leaves behind 2 children and a pregnant wife.
Incredibly sad. Meanwhile, this morning, we're learning more about the ambush in which Sergeant Johnson and his 3 fellow soldiers were killed back on October 4th in a country where many Americans didn't even know we had military forces.
Now, there have been conflicting reports from the military as to what happened in Niger. Secretary of Defense James Mattis, he went to Capitol Hill to brief Senator John McCain, who has been demanding more information, and it comes amidst a fresh war of words between the White House and a Florida congresswoman who listened in on a phone call between President Trump and the family of Sergeant Johnson.
A lot to talk about this morning. We begin our coverage with ABC's David Wright, who's at the White House. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan and Paula. We are learning a lot more about that deadly ambush. It took place 17 days ago. Some Democrats are already calling it Trump's Benghazi, but there's still a lot we don't know.
Mr. President, did you authorize the mission there?
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, over. Thoughts on the second?
President Trump has been uncharacteristically tight-lipped about the tragic mission that cost the lives of 4 American soldiers, 3 of them Green Berets. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill want answers. Senator John McCain threatened to use subpoenas to get them. On Friday, Defense Secretary James Mattis showed up in person to brief McCain.
I felt that we were not getting sufficient amount of information, and we are clearing a lot of that up now.
Here's what we know about the attack. It took place October 4th near the village of Tongo Tongo. The U.S. soldiers, accompanying Nigerian troops, met with a village elder. A senior intelligence official tells ABC News that during that meeting, the soldiers had an inkling of danger. The hair on the back of their neck stood up after 2 motorcycles raced out of the village. The intelligence official tells us the troops felt like the elder was trying to stall them. Sure enough, armed fighters soon hit them with everything from the woods on both sides of the road, small arms, vehicle-mounted weapons, even mortars. The U.S. team wasn't expecting combat. Their vehicles, unarmored, they had no U.S. air support, and French aircraft didn't get there until a half hour into the firefight. To date, the president has not said a thing about the mission itself. Instead, the conversation this week unraveled over how best to honor fallen troops and console their families, with White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly ultimately stepping in to smack down a Florida congresswoman who had listened to the president's call to a grieving widow. Kelly is a Gold Star father himself. On Friday, the White House press secretary went so far as to suggest that Kelly should have the last word on the matter.
If you want to get into a debate with a four-star Marine general, I think that that's something highly inappropriate.
The president called him an elegant man, adding that he's doing a fantastic job.
He was so offended that somebody would be listening to that call. He actually couldn't believe it.
Bottom line, we still do not have a complete picture about what happened in Niger. The Pentagon is conducting an investigation with the FBI's help, and the Senate Armed Services under John McCain is likely to hold hearings.
And convince their followers that everything they say is coming to pass. So this is a significant victory in terms of demonstrating that what was the Islamic State is beginning to disappear. Now that's the good news. The bad news is that in fact they have spread in a lot of places. They have created sleeper cells in Europe. Obviously, their offshoots exist in Africa, as Senator Graham was saying. We saw today that there was a major ambush that killed a large number of Egyptian senior security people, which also shows the Islamic State and its affiliates are in Egypt, in Africa, in Europe, in the Philippines. So this is still a very big battle, but their ability to appeal based upon their successes has certainly been made harder by the fall of Raqqa.
Yeah, I mean, that is like taking Hitler's bunker in Berlin, in a sense. And the Trump administration was able to, achieve this with their allies. But some are also worried at the fall of Mosul. I mean, the radical Islamic terrorists then conducted the Barcelona attack. So I imagine what you're saying is, as you said, they're spreading out, like cockroaches when you turn the lights on in the room. And now our new effort and the new challenge is, for example, what's happening in Africa.
I think we have to recognize that the problem is partly military, but not completely military. We can defeat them in places, but they also have an ideology that is appealing to those who are disaffected, those who feel oppressed, those who feel left out. And so part of our challenge is not only to defeat them militarily, but at the same time, we have to do a couple of things. We have to have an approach that emphasizes good governance. We have to have an approach that helps to create economic development. We also have to have an approach that actually discredits the ideology. Now, we can't do that, but we have one new major asset. You have lots of ISIS fighters who are now surrendering. Now, the fact that they consider themselves and present themselves as holy warriors, the fact that they are presented as if they have a charter from God, suddenly, if you can put some of those who have surrendered, and at least put the image of them surrendering, hands up, it begins to defeat the image that they're holy warriors.
Yeah, and are we doing that?
How is it they're surrendering?
I mean, are we doing that? That should be broadcast, throughout the Middle East and in Africa.
We should be putting that on social media. We should show them surrendering, number one. Number two, we should have them coming on and telling their stories. Many of them also became disaffected from ISIS. And if you can show those who were part of ISIS and put that online, because ISIS uses social media as a very effective platform. Well, you also have to compete with them on that, but it can't be us saying it. But having those who were themselves part of ISIS now coming out and saying, look, here's why they surrendered. Here's why it wasn't what it was presented to be. That does create an ability to begin to discredit them. You can't just defeat them militarily. You also have to discredit them. We can't discredit them. Sunni Muslims can discredit them.
They can discredit themselves finally. I mean, look, you had the 1998 bombing of the two embassies in Nairobi by al-Qaeda. Obviously, you had the Mali, Nairobi, Westgate attack, that in 2013. So they've been out there in Africa. Can they finally discredit themselves? Do you think in their hearts this philosophy can finally be defeated? Because it won't stop until that philosophy is killed.
My worry is that if we don't do more to use the instrumentalities that they use. It's not that the U.S. isn't using social media, but the fact is we can't be the ones who discredit them. It has to come from Sunni Muslims who portray them for what they are. They're a perversion of Islam. They're not the representatives of Islam. And more has to be done with them on social media. That's why creating these images of so-called holy warriors surrendering with their hands up does a lot to discredit them. Putting those who actually become alienated from ISIS because they saw what it really was on social media, letting them tell their stories, that can be effective. And also defeating them militarily, because their claim to in a sense, represent the ideal form of Islam is validated when it looks like they're succeeding. When they keep losing, it's hard then to present their message and have it be compelling.
All right, Ambassador, thank you. Hopefully that is the message that